Hello, welcome to the Design Disruption. It's 2021, but last year, the world collectively fought what turned out to be one of the biggest crises of this century. We saw what happens when a global risk becomes a reality. The many systemic challenges our society faces were laid bare. But we also saw that there was great momentum to build a more inclusive and sustainable and resilient world. In Design Disruption, we've been speaking to visionaries to discuss what a more equitable, healthy, and livable urban future looks like. I'm Prathima Manohar, and I'm so thrilled to bring these important conversations to you with my co-host, Sam Lubell. Sam?
Thanks, Prathima. Appreciate the introduction. Really excited to be doing, I think this is our 8th episode, and we are more than thrilled to have Kai-Uwe Bergmann on the show. Kai is a partner at Bjarke Ingels, Bjarke Ingels Group, and obviously Big is, their name is very appropriate, one of the biggest, most important firms right now in all of architecture, really one of the great disruptors and really disrupting the kind of the status quo, and they've been doing that for a long time now. So Kai, we are just absolutely thrilled to delve into this topic, which is the idea of using resilience and resiliency as a tool for building community, and then expanding on that, kind of expanding what the meaning of infrastructure is to build community. And it's something that you guys have really specialized in and really are doing more than I even knew, as we discussed before the show. So why don't you, we'd like to start the show first seeing how you're doing, and then we want to get your take on this topic.
Thanks, Sam, and thank you, Prathima, so very much for the invitation, and really to speak to everyone. It is a very I think poignant moment, and one both that has really led to a lot of self-reflection, and also looking at how history teaches us that there have been moments of crisis and, of course, shocks to the system before. And so I think I'm just going to share my screen. And when we actually look in the past, we can see that, moments of past pandemics and also sort of crises like cholera actually led to the sort of modern sewer system, or just sort of a more hygienic way of thinking about waste removal. And certainly we can see also in, I live here in New York, that there were moments of just massive overcrowding and sort of lower Manhattan, and that certainly led to a sort of global appreciation of green spaces and parks. And in these days, we can certainly see what an important role these open spaces and public realms are. And very specifically to New York, of course, 9/11 also had as a kind of cause and effect heightened levels of security, and looking at how we actually use the spaces both outside of our buildings and inside. And most recently, even since Big has actually been in New York, Superstorm Sandy certainly also left a undeniable sort of mark, and had the city start thinking about its resiliency and how to deal with these kinds of these events. So our project, the Big U, was really born from that. And this is, of course, an image that many people around the world sort of remember. And the city has taken steps. The Big U is only one of many different initiatives that the city has undergone. And while we were sort of researching about the city, we of course realized that much of the areas that flooded during Sandy were actually infill areas, places that had been added to Manhattan. And here you can see sort of that first area. It's a 2.5 mile stretch of what is called the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, the first part of the Big U that actually will be built. And all of the areas behind it that in blue were flooded and will be protected by it. So none of this work is done, by ourselves. There's an amazing group of both engineers and sort of water specialists and ecologists, and it's also listening to the people. So I think now over 500 meetings have occurred with the community and in and around to discuss just what kind of effects actually occurred. A lot of the older growth trees were uprooted and continue to be uprooted during major storm events. Another testament to this is what it takes from the city side, the agency side, to make a project like this possible. And you really have different departments with very different perspectives, from parks to transportation to the environment. And in doing that, we find ways to actually create a sort of and support the social life, so that the investments of protecting the city against sea level rise don't also impact negatively the ability for all generations to enjoy the waterfront. And so it's really, for us, important that this is something that is just sort of dovetails into our daily life, and then also, of course, protects us against those moments when there are those shocks to the system. So that was maybe to just start off the conversation, a look at sort of what we have going on with the Big U.
That's excellent. Prathima, do you want to start with the question?
Yeah, I think I just want to say that one of the key agendas that have emerged last year post the pandemic, which I mentioned was the biggest crisis that we've faced this century, was resilience, right? Everybody now recognizes that resilience is crucial for the success of the city or the nation. And I love how your firm has reimagined climate resilience with the Big U project, where you combine recreation and social life with resilience. I remember looking at some of these kind of infrastructure for managing these kind of climate risks as those ugly functional engineering solutions of dams and big dikes, as a way to handle sea level rise. So it's so nice to see a flood barrier almost as a social public space. Talk to us about this philosophy and how this emerged, because even till recently, we still continue to discuss the risks associated with the other big threat that we all, the climate change that we are all going to face as a big engineering kind of solution. So talk to us about this philosophy of combining public life and public space with
of course. I think that's really the crux, or really what we are looking at this and what we call social infrastructure. That infrastructure is not something that is simply an engineered solution. That you can never really disassociate people or our activities with those infrastructural investments. And you can look at this also sort of culturally, because a place like the Netherlands has been living with water issues for hundreds of years, and they have actually water boards or sort of municipal level ways of the community dealing with and also stating what their needs are. So investments in the Netherlands for water protection or against flood protection, at the same time also are investments into parks, also investments into winter sort of enjoying the activities of like ice skating and social programs and parking houses that you also need. So it's something that is very integrated into the daily life. And I think that that's something that we can learn a lot from, so that when we do see where we have lost that connection to, I think, the human aspect, we as architects can play that role of sort of reintegrating the social aspects, the equitable aspects into these types of projects and investments.
So Kai, that's a really good point. I think it's one of your firm's biggest strength is incorporating the human element into a field that often is missing it. But I am curious, given COVID-19 and the idea that, the shift in how we used to, everything was geared towards trying to get together. And now, at least temporarily, things seem to be shifting to staying apart. How does that have an impact on these plans at all? On these plans to, gather community and gather as many people kind of as you can?
I think it's actually proven that these spaces are incredibly vital in these times. Public realm and parks, specifically in New York, are actually the areas that most people gather in and can keep a certain distance. Whereas, indoor activities and a lot of the kind of social events and sporting events or entertainment events suddenly are no longer those social kind of catalysts for us. So we find that, the big U is really actually something that is, there was a resiliency aspect to it, which was flood management. But now there's a new layer of resiliency, which is just human interaction and really human space that is very much needed in a city as dense as New York. And this is also something you can see playing out in different cities all around the globe, where streets are more and more important. Cities like Paris, Barcelona, and elsewhere are all investing in the public realm. And I think that this is maybe one of those outcomes of the COVID pandemic, is a reemergence and kind of the importance of these public spaces.
Right, and another part of the social element that you mentioned just earlier, you said you had 500 meetings, which just kind of blew my mind, by the way. Just what that entails. You guys deserve medals for that. But anyway, I think that is what it takes. And I think I just love to hear a little bit more about what it takes, like you're gathering of thinkers and experts, you're meeting with people, you're working with agencies that don't always want to change. You guys, there's so much more to this than just having good designs, and you guys seem to have figured out how to push the envelope where other firms kind of fail that way.
I think fundamentally you have to start with that everyone wants, I think, a positive impact to their life. And what you're really doing in, of course, going out and meeting people is to hear from them what is important. And within the big U, it became very evident that there was a lack of green space, a lack of of programming that the residents in these hard-hit areas, over 200,000 people were basically homeless after Sandy in this specific area of New York. So, when you can actually, I think, listen and hear and prioritize those needs, and then, of course, it's to understand how the policies that basically instruct life, what their intentions are, and then you sort of unravel the policy and also all of the initiatives that sort of have come before, and how those can dovetail with the needs of the local community. And that's where I think we, as a group, again, we were about 15 different specialties. We approached this from all of those different viewpoints. We help the city we help the citizens understand kind of what is possible. And then you create the vision of that possibility and work very sort of, relentlessly and also in a sort of positive push towards a positive outcome.
So relentless positivity.
Yes.
I'm gonna write that down. I like that.
Yeah.
Kai, how has COVID-19 changed your kind of thinking about this big infrastructure project for the future?
Maybe I can also share our thinking on a project like the Brooklyn Bridge, which is just outside our door. So if you can just flip back to the slides.
I think you'll have to share it again, Kai, because it's...
Okay. I can certainly do that.
And I'd love to also hear about how you integrated nature-based solutions, like, using garden as a sponge in the Big U project as well. And tell us about that.
Yes.
As well.
Of course.
While I pull up your screen. Yeah.
So, our office is literally right here in the building in the lower right, if you can see the screen. One of the moments in this last summer that certainly stuck with everyone and also, I think, became an international conversation was one of equity and Black Lives Matter. This is an image of that first sort of a demonstration that crossed the Brooklyn Bridge and literally shut down the traffic and really made the bridge itself into a kind of public space. And we were working on a competition that was led by the Van Allen Institute at reimagining the Brooklyn Bridge at the very same time that those demonstrations were occurring. This is a project that we did and are doing with Arup. And the Brooklyn Bridge, of course, is this icon of New York, and it's of course also been a very strange time and period during COVID. When we look back at the inception of 140 years ago, over 400,000 people used the bridge daily. And, that has actually gone down to around circa 160,000 people daily because it has now prioritized automobiles and people are sitting individually in their cars. So what we wanted to look at was to sort of address, is this the best and most efficient way of using this bridge, this connection? So we looked at actually layering different types of mobility, pedestrian, bicycle, e-scooters, and autonomous vehicles. And we came up with this idea that we could actually increase the use of the bridge by actually creating more diversity, and we felt also a more equitable means of transportation. So you didn't actually have to own a car to necessarily take advantage of this resource. And this, by just looking at it, it is a bottleneck in terms of how people move to and from the different boroughs. And so we sort of imagined, what if all of the bridges or several of the bridges that connect New York with Brooklyn could integrate this type of thinking, that you could suddenly create different types of networks that again would sort of prioritize different modes of transportation. And if you look at New York as it is today, it's sort of arterial streets and then of course the grid. We are sort of questioning whether we shouldn't actually reconsider the grid to prioritize pedestrians on the sort of light pink, a sort of hybrid pedestrian, bicycle, and public transportation on the pink, and then a more sort of car and truck and logistics on the deep purple. And that this could, in a way, create a very different and new way of imagining the city all connected, which we sort of have penned as Woven NYC. And again, this is something that even is happening right now as we speak in Barcelona, where the super blocks are sort of turning into both pedestrian blocks and vehicular blocks. And then also Paris, of course, has just announced where the Champs-Élysées is actually going to turn into a major sort of green park that is pedestrian friendly. So, go
Kai,
ahead.
sorry, we didn't have the video on for the Champs-Élysées part. You want to back up your slides so we can show that?
Sure. Okay. So, can you see that now?
Yeah.
All right, and that is showing you, I think, another project and how we're thinking. So maybe we can keep going from there.
Excellent. It seems to me like this idea of of infrastructure being rethought for people. Again, you're bringing people into it, and for obviously for pedestrian scale, for bicycles, for and infrastructure, but also the urban, the whole urban realm being rethought that way. It seems to me to be a kind of a continuation of this idea of mixed use. Like there, back in the mid-century, everything had its own use, and part of that was because factories were not very nice to be next to where you live. But that's all changing, and I always think about mixed use, and it's kind of overdone now. Mixed use housing where you've got stores on the bottom, you've got living above, but mixed use infrastructure I think is not a common. People don't say that, and that seems to be where you guys are taking things to go into. Every piece of infrastructure, whether it's a street, whether it's a bridge, whether it's a water, whether it's a levee, everything can be thought of as mixed use, and I think that's something that most people can't get their heads around, and. But I think it's a fascinating way to look at it.
And also, Sam, I think it's about just taking stock of changing patterns, right? So I think one important thing is not to sort of be frozen in a certain way of doing things. And certainly the car and the sort of priority of car infrastructure from the time that the freeways were built across this country to parking spaces dominating a lot of urban environments in the U.S. And what we're seeing is a sort of dismantling necessarily of the passenger vehicle, and it becomes more of a shared service. So you don't need to own a car outright. You can just basically use it. And a city like New York, in a way, has always had that thinking because of the whole cab industry of just popping into a car when you need it. But we can certainly see that where there was a priority over many decades, that those are shifting. And as people get more choices in e-scooters or e-bikes, and places become more walkable. Remember that most of the waterfronts in New York were not very accessible. Right. Now we're really making these into pedestrian environments. And so people are making choices of where they work, where they live, and suddenly you're able to rethink these infrastructural, paradigms that we've set up.
And did a lot of this stuff, this thinking along the lines of changing the city itself, did that grow out of Brooklyn Bridge, and then you started thinking about that, or is this something that you were already working on?
Yeah, it was a combination of things. So the competition that the Van Allen invited us to was just to look at the bridge itself. And they were happy if we were just thinking of the anchors on either side of the bridge. When COVID happened and suddenly the entire city shut down and people started biking as opposed to taking the subway, we saw a different pattern, a different life. And we started to sort of ask ourselves, how could these different patterns kind of look at the larger piece of the city, so that suddenly what you're doing in the bridge becomes a catalyst and it has a ripple effect of a much larger footprint. And I'm really excited to say that even Mayor de Blasio has just announced that they're actually going to close 2 lanes of traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge to bikes. And that is going to have a major impact on the biking infrastructure on either side of Manhattan and Brooklyn as well.
Kai, this is amazing. I think I love to hear conversations of, putting people first, building more people-centric infrastructure and moving away from auto-centric infrastructure, which is a big conversation that people across the world are having. I think one of the big ideas that happened during COVID was also the 15-minute city, which Miriam Walls also referred to. Hi, Miriam. She says 15-minute city. So, what are I love the kind of idea of using almost urban acupuncture, like what you did at with that vision with Brooklyn Bridge for wider transformations for the city of Manhattan. Are there other places in the world where you're doing similar types of intervention, which can lead to more people-centric cities? Do you want to give us example, and also tell us why this is so important? Because this is a very crucial conversation to have, especially for places like Mumbai, where I am from, where we're in India, for example, we're going to be moving 600 million people into our cities.
Yes.
So, we must build it right, and
I
tell us why people-centric infrastructure is so important.
Yes, we actually call the Brooklyn Bridge project the People's Bridge for that very reason, that we want the bridge and its infrastructure to be a celebration of people and a gathering space for people. But I think it's also important to not view this as us against them, or bikes against cars. It's really important to think about the coexistence where future autonomous vehicles or EV vehicles have also a place, both from a logistic standpoint and a delivery kind of way, but that we actually need to think smarter and more intelligent about how these different modes of transportation can coexist. And I think, Sam, you had some great examples of how both the biking infrastructure and the pedestrian and car kind of can all coexist together.
It is something that I think it is getting around in the world. It's something that it's in the water, as they say. And here are a couple examples of infrastructure that are being reused in different ways. This is in Seoul, when you have literally highway overpasses being turned into walkways and parks, and trying to do that. It's not working when I'm skipping the thing. How do I get to the next? Sorry, more tech issues. I'm trying to skip to the next image and it doesn't seem to be doing it. 1 second.
And we certainly, Prathima, to also answer your question, we see this sort of people first as something that is, I think, also the sort of driver of, you could say that there was in the 1960s and 70s a kind of infrastructure first sort of mentality, and you would sort of make major investments in those infrastructures. Another project here in New York that we're working on is the BQP, and maybe I'll just go through that one really, really quickly. If you can share the slides, Prathima. And
I did.
Fantastic. So, the BQP is, again, it's a work not just by us, but by a number of folks like Arcadis and Sherwood and Nelson Nygaard and MVVA Van Valkenburg. So this is taking one of those infrastructures that was built in the 1950s, a triple decker right on the water. So it really does separate Brooklyn Heights from the waterfront. And when we look back at what Brooklyn Heights looked like pre this investment of car investment, it was a natural hill that went down to the waterfront. And now that this is an aging infrastructure that needs to be reinvested, and we have to sort of either tear it down or rebuild it, we kind of just are asking ourselves, what could we do in this instance? So we are in this way sort of proposing and have shown that one could actually take all of the lanes of traffic and place them on the ground, which is, I think, a safer place to be, and then cap it so that it actually increases the current Brooklyn Bridge Park by another 12 acres of parkland. And you know, and then the remnant of the triple decker it stays sort of there as a kind of highline kind of artifact, or one could also sort of bury it and recreate the sort of hillside that was there to begin with. And that in our way is also a way to, again, you could do something in this 1.5 mile of critical infrastructure where the triple decker exists, but the ramifications could go much further. And there's proposals of capping the sort of the trench that was built in the Robert Moses era in Carroll Gardens, and you could start to cap that and re-knit the neighborhoods together. And you could start to think of it from Verrazano Bridge all the way up to Randall Island, and start to think about how this BQE, the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, again turns into something that actually is a positive public kind of amenity.
So I think that I think I've got this working now. Hold on one second. The tech part is not my specialty, but here are a few examples around the world just of some of this way of thinking. And it's sort of infrastructure, as you said, meets people, but it's also infrastructure meets culture. It's just, I mean, it's almost like we need to find a new word for infrastructure. But anyway, so this was the project I was mentioning in Seoul. This is a famous project, but not as well known in where we are in the United States. It's the Promenade Plantée in Paris, former rail viaduct turned before the High Line, I should add, turned into a beautiful walking path.
I love that park in Paris.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful. It's really wonderful.
It seems like almost seems like the inspiration to High Line, and also the new vision that Kai has for BQP. Can you explain to our global audience what that means? Brooklyn Queens Promenade, is that what it is? BQP?
No, BQP is the Brooklyn Queens Park, is what we're calling that section of the, so turning an expressway into a parkway.
Wow.
And I want to add that one of the things I love about the BQP, which is kind of like the Promenade Plantée, kind of like some of these other projects that I'm showing here. This is a project that instead of the High Line kind of thing, this next one, if I can get it to work, is a project that's sort of low. It's kind of dug underneath, and it becomes a bicycle path. And this is a project where you have a former in Seattle, where you have infrastructure for oil and gas being turned into a park. This is in Los Angeles. Sorry for that. That's so tiny, but a project, the 6th Street Bridge being turned into parks and you can actually walk on the sides of the bridge. But this idea that these projects, and I've been to quite a few of them, and some of them I just love. They aren't just about building a community in a place. They're about connecting communities. They're about, like, when you walk on, my brother used to live in Atlanta, and I go on the Beltline, which is another former railway park. And you walk along the Beltline, and you're realizing you're going past neighborhoods that you didn't even know were next to each other. It's connecting communities in a way that your head didn't realize were next to each other because you've just been driving by them or taking a subway. And that's really valuable, because a city doesn't really cohere until you do something like that, and it just changes your view of the city.
Absolutely. And Sam, it's wonderful to know that you are from Georgia. I grew up in LaGrange, Georgia, an hour south of Atlanta. Nice. So another connection there. Yes. I think what we are hoping for is that these. You're showing a lot of great examples, and of course these are happening in cities around the world. We're hoping that these great examples again cause a larger discussion, and within our own neighborhoods, and really also to those that are listening out there, that these can also serve as an inspiration or a catalyst to make changes in your communities that you feel would benefit everyone. And because I think any project by itself has the potential to make incremental change. And then you can also, of course, enter the sort of ideas competitions like Van Allen's Reimagining the Brooklyn Bridge, and you can start to think of how to make maybe larger changes or societal change, and be absolutely surprised when the mayor kind of agrees with you.
These are great examples of taking some of those old big infrastructure and integrating, green and making it people-centric. And Kai, tell us what are the kind of challenges you will face if you when you are going to implement some of these, large-scale urban transformations, and what cities have as capacity to be able to drive this type of agenda?
I think that the biggest challenge is time, and I call it political time, because everyone in most countries will have sort of administrative changes that occur on 4-year cycles or 5-year cycles. And you may have built a lot of support within one administration, but then when a new administration arrives, you might have to start all over again. And these projects, like the Big U, this has now been a project we've been working on for 8 years, and that is in itself the challenge. And I think that what you have to do is you have to create projects and also visions that many people can identify with, and that really speak to many generations, because it may take a generation to actually implement portions of those ideas. And I think our job as the designers is to make things as accessible and as relatable as possible, at the same time of having an aspiration that may be beyond what people can see happening in their lifetime.
Kai, you make it sound easy, but I think people often say the biggest challenge for urban transformation is not technical; it's often political. And your firm's been, you've been able to convince political leaders in many cities to kind of take on these tough agendas. And tell us a little bit about that. As an architecture firm, how do you engage with these kind of politics? And obviously, community engagement seems to be a big part of it, as I understand. But tell us about why that is so crucial to achieve these.
We learned a lot, actually, early on in our career when we tackled a project called Superkilen in our own hometown of Copenhagen. This was a highly contentious site, and it was also one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city. And it was about building bridges between sort of different aspects of the neighborhood that had been in conflict with each other. And it was kind of decided very early on that instead of us as designers coming with a kind of pre-described way of designing the space, we would actually turn things around and crowdsource the design elements. And we kind of asked everyone, again, through public forums, through the radio, through meetings, what kind of public space could you imagine for yourself? And then we became not designers, but actually curators of those conversations. And then, we got thousands of ideas. We then started to whittle and edit and curate those down to kind of 108 different samplings of these sort of conversations that we had with the citizens. And then the park became this actual journey where we would take people to their home countries, find the sort of benches that they remember from their youth, and bring that bench to Copenhagen, or a water fountain, or a light pole, a neon sign that they remember. And we would actually find the actual sign or replicate it. And suddenly you had a public space that literally already had thousands of proponents. You didn't actually have to convince anyone, because they were already convincing their friends and their family. And it's been a very successful public space in the city of Copenhagen ever since. And I think that project in many ways informed how we look at the sort of public process and how we integrate that thinking. And of course, that's a very important element when you're talking about public officials and the public process, because once you have that support, it becomes much easier to do things.
Kai, it seems like, I mean, you're very lucky in the fact that your firm, I mean, you're in New York now, but your firm originally came out of Copenhagen, which with these kinds of ideas, this is one of the bicycle highways in Copenhagen.
I love that project.
Yeah, and that's been copied, all over the world. That kind of concept, and it seems like you've got this amazing starting point. But I'm also interested in how. Okay, so you're rethinking infrastructure, and that leads to rethinking streets and entire urban space. But it almost seems like it then, in some ways, circles around, because you're building your architecture. And I think of the harbor project you did, the Danish harbor museum project that you did. Then it just begins to incorporate infrastructure into your architecture as well. So it's almost like, again, these delineations start to fall apart. So I'm kind of curious about how it again comes back to architecture.
Maybe Prathima, if you share the screen again, I can actually show you that through a project, what you were just talking about, Sam. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
So, this is just a rendering or an idea of what Manhattan must have looked like, or the whole sort of 5 boroughs of Manhattan, and in its natural setting. And of course, you have estuaries and you have wetlands, anything you would sort of expect. And we are developing a site just where you see the white circle. As the city grew, you still had softer edges and wetlands, but then the city also grew sort of a harder, more industrial waterfront sort of setting. And really, that's been what has happened for 400 years in this city, is just growing that sort of edge. And what we're realizing now is how important it is to actually have those softer edges and those softer pockets spread throughout a estuary or a river like the East River. And so here you can see where in yellow there are these sort of intertidal habitats. And the River Street project is actually one that we're proposing to kind of now recreate the ecological infrastructure for these sort of natural habitats and ecosystems to kind of once again coexist. So this is a project that through architecture, through in a way development, you're able to once again restitch a very important and vital ingredient to this place. Here's what it looks like now. It was a former Con Edison kind of power plant, and so it's just sort of remained there as a kind of unbuilt big sort of open space. And you can notice on both the right and the left, you've had green spaces that have been built and sort of a waterfront promenade. And this is the one area in that entire promenade that's sort of unbuilt. And then here is the sort of renaturalizing the waterfront, and not only renaturalizing, but also looking at the sort of ecological effects of this site. So this is what it looks like today. And then we're actually carving back into the infill that was built there to create a natural beach. This would be the kind of first of its kind sort of natural wetland and beaches. We've seen other areas along the Brooklyn Bridge Park that also have naturalized this water edge. And then we have breakwaters. Those breakwaters also reduce the sort of tidal action that is very, very harsh. So imagine what we're doing on this site as actually the ecosystem of Jamaica Bay, which is another part of New York, and it's where the JFK airport is that you can see there in the lower left.
Yeah, I just took my dog for a walk in the Jamaica Bay on some of the parks there. Yeah.
And so what's
Marine
happening on the macro level at Jamaica Bay is actually what's going to be happening here. And as the wave action hits those breakwaters, it will become stiller and stiller water. And that will have the effect that in any kind of sea surge, the water will be contained to the green line as opposed to coming into the red line. And so this is a way for, really important, I think, investments in both social spaces for kids and for families, but also for the entire community to sort of retake its waterfront. And to your earlier point, Sam, about how important are these public spaces, we could see in the Domino Park that became kind of a sort of release, a COVID kind of over the summer. That's where people
Absolutely.
Congregated and experienced. So this is a way to not only design buildings, it's also a way to design ecosystems, and field operations has been instrumental in this work with us to show what the natural aspects are of building along the waterfront.
Yeah, it seems to me.
Just in conclusion, these projects for us, I've shown you 4 projects in New York, is really a kind of love letter to New York. And since we're so close to Valentine's Day, I thought it was kind of apt to show you our first project in New York, which was Big Valentines in New York City. Yes,
I think New York should be all of our Valentines this year. I think that I just want to ask a quick thing, which I think that what you were saying about building communities and the idea of kind of in some ways welcoming nature into projects where we used to try to keep it out. I think that global warming, rising tides, there's a weird positive spin that I can put on all this, which is I think it is going to force us to accept nature instead of trying to fight off the water. Like in Big U, you're kind of accepting it, you're letting it come in, and that can shape a much more natural, urban environment. If if you have to let water in, if you have to kind of let natural kind of barriers take their place, and I'm seeing that around the world. Let me just see if I can add. Are these okay? So this is in Hamburg. City. Yeah, Hafen City in Hamburg. The idea of, well, we're going to build this beautiful plaza, but when it floods, it's going to be underwater, and that's the way it's designed. It's like we're welcoming the water, and it's making for a much different. It's shaping our urban realm, just like green architecture shapes the design of architecture. Sustainable, resilient architecture can be shaped by and not try to just fight off what's coming in. And then there's other examples. If I can get this to work, Miami is an example of sort of. I think they've been trying to fight it a little more. They're trying to raise everything. And there's actually been some debate in the city about whether it should be more of a natural barrier. And they're talking about building mangroves, which are natural barriers to water in that region, instead of trying to just lift everything up. And this is a project in the Netherlands to increase parks, sort of like what you're doing to bring in water. This is New Orleans, where obviously famously Hurricane Katrina came, but how do you make the edges greener? How do you make this kind of levee system into a system of parks? And I think it has a huge impact, maybe in a good way, on the design of our cities, and making it sort of an inspiration versus just this horrible thing that's happening.
Yeah, and honestly, also, it's really creating a major shift in the way that the agencies have been instructed to and have dealt with our waterways. Waterways have been considered, I think, from a transportation standpoint, and when you also think about the sewage that's sort of emptied into them, or industries that are able to also let their waste into the waterways. So we have, I think, really viewed waterways in one-dimensional terms, and these are very complex sort of elements that have major benefits. I mean, Copenhagen, again, our first project was a harbor bath. And to consider that the harbor bath was, I think, built to around 200,000 euro. Yet what the effect of that harbor bath did is it turned people's perception of the canal in Copenhagen as this kind of dirty place that you would never touch or swim in. And it turned it around so that within one generation, it's now so attractive to be building along the waterfront and using the waterfront, boating, all of these pastimes. That simply did not exist 20 years ago. The project is now close to 20 years old. And that's exciting to see in your lifetime how a 200,000 euro investment could change a city's perception of what its main waterway is about. And I think that each city has that potential. One could find ways in which small incremental projects create a sea change of thought.
Yeah, I think it's a famous saying in Brooklyn, where I am, and you are too. The Gowanus, which is people's minds are beginning to change about that. There was a term for the sludge that was in the Gowanus called black mayonnaise, which I think is the most disgusting and amazingly appropriate adjective I've ever heard. But once you get rid of that kind of stuff, and then people's perceptions change, then you open up, then you can change things. But things like that, people have these negative perceptions in their head that just stick there. So you're fighting a PR campaign to do that.
So I think I wanted to just sort of show 4 projects in New York because, of course, we're working in many different countries around the world on a lot of these same aspects. But I felt that it was important to kind of stay in one way local, but understanding that these local initiatives and these projects truly could happen anywhere. And waterways, if you think about major cities, I believe 80% of major cities around the world are built along rivers and coastal areas. So, this is what will touch everyone. Also, sea level rise will affect every architect that is designing works in those areas. And so we have a responsibility, I think, knowing that these issues are occurring as to what we think about them.
Right. Prathima, go ahead. Sorry.
I know, Sam, you want to show some slides, and we have it up.
This is the project quickly, and we don't have to talk, but this is the project I was talking about, the Danish Maritime Museum, and this concept of incorporating architecture into the, infrastructure into the architecture that you do itself. And I just think that's another, I didn't get a chance to show that, but I love that it's moving into that direction.
And I think, Sam, that's an important one because there's a lot of history along these waterfronts. We're also, I think, not advocating just getting rid of everything and greening everything. And it's really a balance. You have to sort of take stock. This is a dry dock. And at one point in time, Helsingør, where this is built, was one of the busiest shipbuilding yards in Northern Europe. And there were actually about 4 or 5 of these dry docks of which there's only this one that is now sort of a remnant. It's really important to realize that we're also kind of deciding what one should maintain and keep for future generations, because Denmark has always been a shipbuilding nation, has always been very much interested in maritime and getting out, and that's what we wanted to celebrate in this one building. And by the brief of the project was to fill in the dry dock and put a roof over it, and so we didn't. When we did the competition, we decided to throw the brief out the window and preserve the dry dock and make it actually the centerpiece of the exhibit. So we carved out around the dry dock and had people look into it and use it. And I think that is also a really important thing to remember, is that as we work in places that have different layers of history, what to sort of maintain and keep, and what to refresh and reinvigorate.
Right. I think, isn't this Hamlet's Castle?
Yes.
That's part of that?
Yeah.
So I think that's around here. That's cool. So you're dealing with a lot there. So Prathima, sorry, you were gonna take us in a new direction, and I cut you off. So with that,
I just wanted to say, Sam, how what Kai mentioned is so true. I think the conversations that we've had this evening on resilience and reimagining infrastructure and people-centric infrastructure is one of the most important agendas as we move out of this pandemic and move towards recovery. And I hope that our economic recovery plan will be based on some of these ideas, because it's so crucial to addressing climate change and equity and inclusion as we get out of this crisis and try to build back better. So, Kai, it was really nice to see those visions for New York, and I can't wait to come and hang out in some of those parks very, very soon as we get out of this global pandemic, which I hope will be sometime this year. But yeah, I wanted to move to the next segment, which is quick fire, where we want to get to know you a little bit better.
Yes.
And I'm going to start, Sam. Is that okay?
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to
by the way, it's only early afternoon here. And Prathima, by the way, is in India. That's why she said evening, just so we clarify.
Yeah. I think we always have to say good morning, afternoon, and evening, because we've had this amazing community join us from around the world, and I want to say hi to them again. And I'm going to wait for some questions from them for Kai and curate it after this quick fire segment of our show, where we want to get to know Kai a little bit better. So Kai, my first question to you is, what books do you have on your work table right now? Or tell us.
Now that you say it, the number one book is actually Form Giving, which is a book that we just completed from the office, which is, of course, giving form to the future, or giving form to things that are not yet there. It's been a labor of love for many bigsters in producing the work. It covers about 100 different projects, and it's really I think something that I also go back to, because I really enjoy looking at things that we've done years ago. And then the other one that is also right here is Bruce Mau. And Bruce Mau, I think, is really wonderful as a kind of a rabble rouser, someone who wants to get people motivated out of their seats and into action-oriented design. And I've always respected that. I've had a few times over the past 3 decades where I've come into contact and been able to work with him. And this is a culmination of his last 30 years, which is pretty impressive. The life that he's led.
Oh, both of those seem fascinating. I want to see it again. Form giving. Did you just really? Is that just out this year?
This is out this month. It just came out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. We premiered in India.
Yeah, it starts in the past, and then goes into the present and ends in the future. So we have a couple of projects that we're doing on the moon with NASA, and also on Mars. So
as one does.
It's exactly. It takes some of our learnings. Now, some people sort of have stated, why would you be working on a moon or Mars when our own planet has so much going with it and in need of assistance? I think that our approach is just that by solving things in a lunar atmosphere, where you have to create a circular kind of economy and a circular sort of system, you can then apply the learnings from that directly onto Earth and do that here. So we're viewing this as a kind of research project that will inform all of our projects in I think really massive ways.
Good product placement too. I'm glad you had your book there. I just worked on a book with. I was saying I just booked. First of all, excellent product placement that you had your book there.
Yes.
And it looks fascinating. I'm going to definitely get a copy. I have a couple of your other books, so I definitely want. But the other thing is, I just worked on a project with Bruce, so I can't agree with you more about his vision. So that's exciting that was there. And then speaking of the future, you've designed for amazing amount of clients. It's kind of hard to imagine who you've not. But that's the question that we have is there somebody left? Who would you most like to design something for that you have not yet designed something for?
My God, that is, I think, a great question. Also, because of course I'm tasked at Big with thinking about the future, both in terms of clients and projects. I mean, I've always approached looking at the next things that we are concentrating upon, not only as projects per se that we think of in terms of architecture, but really systemic issues and challenges. And so for me personally, it's always been about energy systems, transportation systems, food distribution systems that where I really take a little bit of umbrance is when you have say a Guggenheim museum competition in Finland, and you have 1,800 people submit ideas and spend months of their time coming up with a sort of an idea for a museum, when we could be using that same brain power, the same effort on actually solving things that are way more substantial for society. So if we were to look at food distribution and we looked at it as a design problem, what would happen if 1,800 teams of engineers, architects, and thinkers were to look at that problem and issue? That to me is a place I think that architects really can have a really profound effect because of the way that we think, the macro to micro scale, and sourcing of materials and phasing. All of those issues we have to deal with on a job site, you could then sort of take to a sort of more universal challenge.
Yeah, I think that's such a nice vision, Kai, to look at making stars out of big social challenges instead of just visual art. So it's great. I think that's a great vision. My question to you is, what magazine do you like to read? besides architectural
Yeah.
publications?
Maybe when we were flying and I was in a lot of airports, I would, of course, always head to the newsstand to grab a magazine. And I think this would explain a lot about me. So the ones that I would sort of immediately sort of pick up would be sort of a Wired and an Economist, because I'm interested in I think the political aspect. Someone once asked me what I would be if I weren't an architect, and I think it would be a sort of a diplomat or something in the UN, because I do feel that that working in large numbers, I really appreciate very complex kind of processes where there are hundreds of people that may be a part of the decision, and so that is something that really is interesting to me, is of how the world is sort of moving forward. And then the Wired aspect is just a real interest in seeing the sort of the technological kind of issues and things that are happening day to day. So the Latin word techne as a tool. What tools do we have today to deal with the issues that are important?
So Kai, this political side is interesting. So I'm assuming you watched the show Borgen.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Danish show, of course.
Yes, and I do need to ask before we go on to the last question, my last question quickly, because you're from Copenhagen originally, or because your accent is so extraordinary.
Yeah, I have my name actually says a lot about me. So Kai is a Scandinavian sort of name. It's usually spelled with a J, K-A-J. Uwe is a very German name. So my family stems from Germany, but I actually also have relatives and ancestors from Scandinavia. So Kai-Uwe is a kind of combination of those lineages. And I was born in Germany, but then my family immigrated to the U.S. When I was about 7 years old. And so I grew up in the U.S., and that's where I picked up I have a Georgian accent too, if you want to go all the way there.
That's really, really good. Next time we're doing this, we're going to do this with that accent the whole time.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So, do you want to do the?
Go ahead.
No, Prathima, you ask that question if you want, the last question.
So this is this quick sketch part of our session, where we are going to ask you to sketch something. Now, a couple of minutes maybe, and I know Kai asked for a little bit more time, but Kai and Sam.
Yes, go ahead and
sketch a completely new type of infrastructure that will help build community, but also has a functional task.
Oh boy.
It's like a puzzle. And while you do that, I want to say hello to the amazing community that joins us during these really important conversations. And I hope you've had a great start to the new year. And I want to say hello to everyone. I know all of you told us where you're from. Ernesto from Angola. We have Jen Sharam from UK, Gloria from Rwanda, Alexandra from Portugal, Osmena from Philippines, Bailey from Malaysia. So it's so amazing to see people from around the world joining this important conversations. And I want to ask you all to maybe share some of your questions or comments for Kai before we wrap up this episode. We have Armans from Latvia as well. So I can't read out all the cities and countries, but it's so nice to see all of you in our digital public square. We have Javier from Chile, Adam from Portland. No, sorry, Poland. Welcome, everybody. And it's so nice to meet all of you. I'm going to read out a few comments that we already have. Manisha Shiva Gunde is asking us about how social distancing will affect pedestrian and public plazas of the future. How can we keep public realm still lively post-pandemic? Hugo Oliveira has a comment about how buildings are responsible for 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the world, not only by the way they operate, but also by the way buildings are built. So his question is, as architects, what can each one of us do to promote carbon neutral architecture, and will we be seeing changes in the main structural materials being used from concrete to massive timber? All very important questions.
I can respond to that last question.
Sure.
I really do think, I've been in the profession now for 30 years. And I can say in those 30 years, there really have been changes in terms of construction, in terms of energy use. And so I'm very hopeful. I'm very optimistic that that our generation and future generations will have a profound impact. It's the scale and the size of that impact is entirely dependent on each one of us. So you have a job to educate the clients as to what carbon neutrality means, both to them and to the citizens of any city that we work in. So we each carry that burden and that responsibility.
So on that note, do you want to show your sketch, or do you, if you're still working on it, I can show mine?
No, I'm fine.
Oh, good.
I'm going to zoom into this. New type of infrastructure with a function.
Can you guys
see it?
What you probably can already presume is a planet with a sun, right?
Yes.
So, what this is getting to is that solar energy is currently completely about where the sun is and where the sun isn't. If you don't have the sun, you kind of don't see any benefit of solar energy. The same can also be said about wind. The windiest places have the most likelihood of having success with wind as a energy source. And as we're trying to wean ourselves from fossil fuels, I think one of the things that we have to address is how do we take the alternative energy sources, sun and wind and wave action, and redistribute them in a way that we can provide access to solar energy in non-solar places, wind energy in non-windy places. And so just as we've always tackled every problem in the world, there was a time where you could not pick up a phone and call someone around the world because there was a limit of the thinking of how to actually do that. Then someone stretched a cable across the Atlantic and you could call from the United States to Europe. The same way now, we should start to think about and tackle distribution, but in the scale of the globe, of the planet. And this is one area that I think is really a big area for architects, again, to help frame those conversations.
So you'd have like a single global energy body administration, that sort of thing, and everything would be kind of distributed on that scale?
Well, just as the UN grew out of certain issues and is a kind of global body that has, good and bad points to it, I think that, energy, as we learn what it is and where it's coming from, can become something that is more strategically considered. Because if we just keep it as localized as it is now, we will approach it the same way that you would approach before the phone. You would only know what you knew in your locality and not learn what other people do around the world. So I think it's about information and data and access to technology and access to thinking. And we can take major leaps in this approach. I
think you're right, and it's one of the things, speaking of your skill in diplomacy or interest, I mean, things like the Paris Climate Accord are fantastic, but most of that stuff is voluntary, and you need something with teeth to sort of, what's to keep a country from not, in their best interest. Maybe they're not going to go as quickly as other people want them. So you need a body, I think, as well, to monitor, but also maybe to enforce. I think that's a really interesting idea. Sam, your sketch. Oh boy. Okay, so I have to give some credit to my inspiration, which is Raymond Hood, who came up with a plan similar to this. But so this is my idea of it's the new version of this. He had these bridges called skyscraper bridges. So you build the housing into the bridge. So this is a skyscraper bridge, but it sort of mixes a skyscraper bridge with an airstream. So if you need to apply this bridge somewhere else, it has thrusters and it can actually lift off and be taken somewhere else. And so you can also bring people if they want to go somewhere else. So so it's sort of a mobile skyscraper bridge. I love it. So that's it.
Yeah. I love all the future casting that we do at the end of this show. And Kai, thank you so much for being a sport and indulging me and Sam. And can we ask you to send us a scan of that? Yeah. Where we thought about the future of how to manage energy for our worlds.
Of course.
Do you want to do one more question from the audience? Can I pull up one more question?
Sure.
Let me see.
So Alan here asks us, he says Kai is a big fan of your presentations. He's interested in your thoughts on how our future living and working experience may be changed due to home, because of the work from home philosophy. Do you think this will impact central office and commercial building? On creating more animated spaces?
So Alan, first off, congratulations on a very good profile picture. Pirate, I think I saw. I think you're right. I think the time that we're in right now is going to have effects and profound effects on the way that we personally, the decisions we make, in our own lives, and how, maybe we want to live with access to outdoor space. Maybe we have one extra little nook for that home office. So it will have personal decisions and effects. What the larger effects of it will be still hard to kind of fathom, and we'll have to spend the next years to truly find out and discover what those are. But what I feel is better air quality. So I think filtration is going to be a major kind of investment now. I also think, we discussed public realm, and that we're going to put more emphasis on the streets and the curbs and the parks that are all around us, and maybe making spaces more flexible so that it's not only cars that the streets serve, but they serve more functions. And then I think in terms of, you can certainly say that also technology in terms of, video conferencing, And what we're doing right here, this very kind of talk, we probably would have done physically, right? I would have traveled someplace and met with a group of people, yet now we're doing it kind of online and even reaching more people. So these are some of these are here to stay. And I think, we'll see through the years ahead what exactly kind of will stay and what that means to us as architects as programs may shift. I would like to leave everyone with just, this was a talk about resiliency. And I hope that your definition of what resiliency means has been broadened, and that it isn't only something that perhaps fights flood and sea surges, but really is about, I think, societal resiliency. It's about an economic resiliency, because it does seem, when I started the talk with cholera and looking at all of the shocks to the system, these shocks occur more often than we think, and so we really need to be prepared to have those shocks occur when they do.
This was such a wonderful conversation, and I want to thank you for spending this hour with us. And we can't wait to come and meet you in person and probably hang out in one of those parks flood defenses disguised as a park.
Would love that, Prathima.
Yeah, and I love what you guys.
Somewhere. We're gonna bump into
we're nearby. We're not far from each other, so we'll catch up when we can. Yeah. And I think it's good to underline that your idea of infrastructure, what that can be, expanding your idea of what resilience is, and really the flexibility to be able to shift quickly between between what we think is going to be our reality and what actually is going to be our reality. So we're thinking, we're all going to work from home, and then something else comes up. We're all going to do, it's like things will shift, and we have to be willing to shift with them. So I think I'm really inspired by what you've accomplished, and by what your firm is, how they're thinking about all these things. So and I think you're changing architecture in that way. So
it definitely is a group effort.
Well, thank you so much, Kai. We really appreciate it. Thanks. Yes. Thanks to Arc Daily. And Prathima, thank you, and we hope that we'll see you.
Thank you to our amazing audience, and stay tuned. We'll be back with more important conversations in the next few weeks. Have a great day. See you soon.
See you. Bye-bye.